All right. Our next storyteller. Idinma is a Nigerian-born, Brooklyn-based creative with a flair for storytelling and community building.
This next story is about the lessons learned from navigating friendships both at home and abroad.
Welcome. Let's give it up for Idinma.
Sim Simma, who got the keys to my blood clot bimmer? Big time driller, monkey to gorilla. Who is this woman that I'm seeing in the mirror? Drink 42 and smoke cigar. Name one time where I didn't deliver. Silent figure.
Hi everyone. Okay, let's get settled here. So this piece was inspired by a poem that I wrote. Yes, okay. On July 21st, 2020, at 12:04 a.m., apparently. It's called Souvenirs. Not one for pussies or clicks. I collect friends like souvenirs on each journey. Each one lovely, each one unique. Together, they are home for me. It's January 5th, 2022. And I'm watching the sunset from a Southwest Airlines flight. For once, I needed both checked bags to fly free. This is it, I thought. I'm moving to the Big Apple to take my own big bite that would finally propel me into the life of my dreams. The announcement comes through the loudspeakers. We're 30 minutes away from LaGuardia. Fasten your seatbelts and prepare for landing. I open Spotify and play New York by the Boxer Rebellion to get myself amped up for the new life that awaits me. I've imagined this moment several times, and even better, I've been here plenty of times before, and so I'm no stranger to this bittersweet feeling that comes with saying goodbye to my old life while my new one beckons sweetly from across the horizon. Yet, there's another familiar sadness that lingers, and for a while, I can't quite place the source. Then, it hits me. I have no friends in New York City, and I'm going to have to start all over again for what feels like the millionth time. I've had a complicated relationship with friendship for as long as I can remember. Part of this complication I owe to the unyielding hands of time. As we get older, we go through so many evolutions of our personhood, and we cannot take everyone through all of them, no matter how much or how hard we try. For the most part, though, I have my nomadic-ish life thus far to thank for the current state of my friendships. See, it can feel tricky to build lasting relationships when you're always on the move, when you're not sure you've lived in a place long enough to call it home, and when home is everywhere and nowhere all at once. When I reminisce about my childhood friendships, I think about how much simpler they were and how everything changed when I grew up. Isn't that, in a way, the story of many of our lives, how everything changes when we grow up? Let's go back in time for a spell. I moved to Lagos to attend a boarding school when I turned 10, and I lived there for the next 6 years of my life, only going home briefly every 3 months or so. I won't regale or traumatize you with stories of a Nigerian boarding school experience in the late noughties, because we'll be here all day. But the experience created deep bonds that I assumed in youthful arrogance would last a lifetime. I moved to the States 10 years ago to continue my education, and over time it would become increasingly difficult to stay in touch with friends that I would have otherwise gone to the same universities as had I remained in Lagos. Since then, I've moved a couple more times, from New Mexico to Oklahoma to Paris, from Austin to Boston to Houston, collecting friends like souvenirs along my journey. I'm thankful for all the lives I have lived thus far, all the places I have been, and most of the people I have met. It may sound exciting to have lived in all of these places, and truthfully, it has been, but it has also felt isolating at times. And I have felt ever so lonely. Sure, many friends are only a video call away, and I have to pause at this point to give a quick shout out to WhatsApp for being that girl. But long-distance friendships, although no less beautiful and authentic, don't quite hit the same as having geography on your side. Enough of my favorite sitcoms depict close-knit friendships with characters who live right next door, right above, or right across the street from each other. At the very least, they always live in the same city and just can't seem to stay away from each other's couches. But real life is not an episode of Living Single, and my best friend lives 700 miles away in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So, I moved to Brooklyn 2 years ago to begin a new career and a new life. Although I would be starting from scratch, I was excited to be here in this concrete jungle where dreams are made of. And it was my dream to finally build a solid community of girlfriends I could count on. And there are over 8 million people in this city, so how hard could it be? Really freaking hard, it turns out. There's so many people passing through New York City in various states of transition without staying long enough to build lasting connections. And while there are ample opportunities to meet people, nothing good comes easy. So if you want to make genuine friendships as an adult, especially in this city, you have to put in some work. And by that I mean you have to be a bit more intentional, and that requires time and patience and trial and error. In school, you're thrust into countless situations where you can make friends organically, right? You see the same people every day in class, you work with them for weeks on projects, you go to parties together, and you don't have to try too hard to build close friendships. If a few of you happen to move to the same city after college, chances are you can easily pick up where you left off. But if you find yourself in a city with none of your close friends, you have to build the community you want because it probably won't come knocking. So I joined Bumble BFF, an Igbo culture club, a book club, a running club, a writing club, relevant professional networks in my job. By relevant, I mean Black, and a great church. I went to events people invited me to, and I invited people to events. I also went solo to my fair share of outings, and I challenged myself to talk to people, something that doesn't always come naturally. Attempting to build community in this way hasn't always been linear. I've been on Bumble BFF dates that didn't quite amount to much. I've been to at least 2 first Saturdays at the Brooklyn Museum where I didn't talk to anyone and just went home, feeling much worse than if I just stayed in. A girl once told me I was brave for being by myself at a concert, which was mostly awkward. I've also said hi to a girl who sat next to me at the movies, and we went out to dinner afterwards. Granted, she left the city shortly after, and we haven't quite met up again, but it was a lovely memory that I will always cherish. Of course, I've also had to be intentional about watering the gardens of my long-distance friendships, knowing all too well how they can slip into nothingness if left untended for far too long. I haven't always gotten it right, but I have come a long way in my relationships, and I have learned some important lessons along the way. I have learned that being kind to myself helps me be kinder to others. I have come to accept that not every new connection will blossom into lasting friendship, and that I don't want them all to, because that's a lot of pressure to put on everyone I meet, and frankly, because it's also an unrealistic expectation. I've come to understand that friends will play different roles in different seasons of my life, just as I will in theirs. I have also learned that envy is a normal human emotion that asks me to question my own ego and insecurities, because it's rarely ever about the other person. I've had to mourn some friendships I thought would last a lifetime in order to make room for new connections to bloom. I don't have friendships entirely figured out yet. Like most of the lessons that make life worthwhile, I suspect that the practice of building healthy and fulfilling relationships may be a lifelong journey. And I think I'm finally making peace with that. I know that I'll have to continue being intentional with my current friendships, especially as we get older and life gets busier. I also know that there are friends I haven't made yet who will love me still. I hope that we can meet ourselves with grace, kindness, respect, patience, care, and good intent. Most of all, I'm learning that friendships don't have to be quite so complicated. Thank you.
Idinma, thank you so much for joining us for the After the Release Craft interview. We have some burning questions to ask you today, and also a lot of questions about your craft, how you came up with the story, and story specifics as well. I think a lot of people can relate to your experience and are going to be able to take away a lot of nuggets from what you have to say today. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so Inma, jumping right in, we want to know how you identify creatively. Do you consider yourself a writer, a storyteller, an artist, and why?
That's a really good question. I think all of the above. Identify as a writer, as a storyteller, as a creative. I don't think that's a label, or maybe label is not the right word, or identity that has always come so easily to me. I think I would always use the phrase aspiring writer, aspiring storyteller. It's just a way to kind of buffer and maybe to, I guess, I don't know how this is going to come across, but maybe lower people's expectations of whatever it is they're about to like hear or receive, because I wasn't
Mm,
quite sure that I deserved that title of writer storyteller. I guess I didn't quite feel like I had always earned it, and felt like I needed to like do more to earn it. I think it's only recently that I've gotten into this headspace of like, no, I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller, and I don't have to have published a book, or I don't have to have insert whatever things that I want to do or that I think should come with the that label. But yes, I do identify as a writer, as a storyteller. I have always loved reading. And I think writing is probably my oldest dream. It's the thing that when I think back to like little, like the youngest that I was, it's the one thing that I've always wanted to do, like at my very core. And so it feels like returning to myself in a way of just kind of like, or honoring like the younger version of myself who's always wanted to do this. And it's a thing that um, I'm realizing now that I owe to myself to just keep working at and keep making sure that I do. And so, yeah.
Ah,
I'm always curious because there's been so many folks that we've interviewed who told stories that have had the same kind of trepidation
Mhm.
about claiming a title. How did you overcome that? I want to lower people's expectations. I don't want to say that I'm doing this because there might be follow-up questions. How did you? How do you? I don't think we necessarily do away with those things, but we may override them. How did you override them to now claim these titles?
Um, that's a good. Hmm. How did I overcome? I would say that I'm still overcoming it. But I think that something that's helped is having people around me that have encouraged me. And I don't know, this feels like the obvious one in the room, but I feel like starting with yourselves, Nneka and Glenn, and in a way, I feel like you also took a chance in me, in letting me come and share my story and like sharing your platform with me and the other, the other um, performers at the event to share their stories. And so I've tried my hand at writing. I've written a few things, and I think it's sharing with friends and like saying, "Hey, what do you think?" And having a friend say, "Oh, that's actually really good. I think that's amazing. I think people would like resonate with that," and being like, "Okay, that's something that people resonate with." I have a blog that I don't. I'm trying to do a lot. I don't do too much with these days, but I'm trying to do more with. And I think I first launched this blog, I think in 2020, and I wrote this story. It's called Hello Fear. It's the very first story I published in my blog, and it was kind of about how I'd been basically flirting around with the idea of starting this blog in the first place and wanting to write and not really wanting to. And then I wrote this piece about how I was really kind of afraid to do some of these things, but I just wanted to just take the dive and just do it anyway and see what happened. And how part of I think the struggle with me in naming myself as a writer is, also that like I'm like, I have so many interests. I want to do a lot of things I want to write, but I'm interested in writing about a lot of different topics. And it felt almost, I guess I kind of thought that I needed to pick a niche and pick a lane and pick one specific thing to be an expert on and like write about that thing. And I didn't know what that thing was. And so I was like, but again, these are just, I had to realize like these are just excuses that I'm telling myself and just like, and not,
Yes.
I'm telling myself and it's just not allowing me to go forward with actually this dream of mine. And so I think that was definitely maybe a pivotal moment. I think in just like that blog post that I wrote about kind of starting this journey, and I shared it on my with my network and social media, and it was pretty well received by people around me, and people said that they resonated a lot with what I wrote about, and I think that was the start of something in a way. I was like, wow, okay, people actually care about this, or it actually resonates with somebody. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I think someone said, your experience is going to resonate with somebody, or someone needs to receive the story you're about to tell. And so I think that's another thing as well, like that's helped me get over that, is that just thinking about like if there's just one person who reads the story today and like, or who goes away with this and it's like, wow, there's something in there that resonates with me, is something that makes me feel seen, that's enough. But taking that even a step closer to myself, if that person is me, you know and or if the only person that if the only person is me, then that's what it is. And there's a quote I saw again online a few years ago that it's okay if you're the only person who's saved by your art. And I think that just
Ooh.
nudged in my brain and has just been there, and it's something I keep returning to, like, just and so I think the very first way that I overcome it actually is writing for myself first and making sure that I'm doing the thing for myself first, and how do I feel about this, and if that's okay, then I think I'm good. And I think I might, Nick, I might have said this to you, but I like um, when I wrote for the story, and I kept editing and editing and editing, and I wrote it in a really short time period because I think I wrote it to close the deadline where we were supposed to submit it, and I was like, okay, you need to turn this in, but I just kept like kind of editing, and I was like, okay, you can edit this thing to infinity, or you can just like send it in, and it's like, are you fine? Do you think is it
Mhm.
okay for you? Like, are you proud of what you've written? And I had to ask myself that, and I was like, I am proud of what I've written, and um, I'm going to not once you put the thing out into the world, like there's however it's going to be received is not that's not something I can control. What I can control is like the writing of it, and the fact that I how I feel about it, and being honest with myself about that. And so I think these are a couple of things that I think have helped me get over that.
No, that's
Super helpful.
beautiful.
Hmm.
Very, especially because it takes a lot of courage, which you went from, yes, like I'm writing about fear and even the fear of writing on this blog, to like, us walking into the Writers Club, New York Writers Club birthday party, and basically being like, Idinma, you need to write something for this, and then
Hmm.
a couple weeks later you're on stage reading something. That I think that is, you should absolutely commend yourself for having the courage to write something, submit something, and then get on stage, in front of 100 people
It's a
and
huge
read your work.
deal.
Yeah,
Humongous, huge
that's another
deal.
thing as well, because I think when I met you guys at Writers Club birthday party, part of my kind of hang up in wanting to send in my story was that I hadn't written it at the time yet, but I remember seeing you got the post about it on Necklace socials in December, and I was like, oh, this is exciting! Like, I've been looking for something like this. I should go and like do something. And then I clicked and I started just going through, and I saw you need to submit an audio, and I was like, okay, well, I was like, that's it. I can maybe try and do the writing thing, but then to actually read out, I was like, I don't want to hear my voice. Who wants to hear that? Um, and so I was like, okay, I
uh,
was like, oh, this is the thing that's gonna. I was like, dang, I really thought this was gonna be the one, but I guess I'll have to wait and see if there's something where I can just write and not have to actually talk about what I've written or like perform it. And anyway,
Mm,
then met you at the Writers Club, and I was like, oh wow, actually maybe this is, and just the conversation we had, and I was like, well, if you think it's your platform, and if you think I should submit something, then who am I to um, not give myself the chance in the first place, right? And so, but yeah,
mhm.
that's another thing too, because I think I always thought about myself. That's I think maybe this is just like the thing of like writer versus storyteller, because I think writing is the writing, and then storytelling can come in so many different forms, and there's different mediums that you can tell a story with, and I think it's one thing to kind of accept myself as a writer, and for me, it's another thing to be like, okay, like there's other different ways I can tell stories too, and that I maybe enjoy telling stories, and maybe some of them are not the most obvious or the most comfortable for me. E.g., the getting up on stage and telling
hmm
the story in front of people. That's the part that's a bit more out of my comfort zone. But it was, really great experience, and it's like even taking that. So another thing I've taken away from it is, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but it's like after sending this the story in, and then getting hearing back that I could perform the story in front of the audience, and I went and did that, and it's like, wow, okay, this is something I've done, and it didn't kill me to do it, and it's like I have that
Mhm.
memory forever, I have that experience forever to take away, and it's like I've done this, and it turned out fine. So it's like in the future, I'm gonna have a hard time convincing myself that I can't do this because I've done it once now. So yeah.
exactly,
100%.
exactly.
Yeah, actually, another one of our questions for you was going to be, what is your relationship to sharing and releasing your work? And it sounds like it ebbs and flows, but it sounds like you continue to push yourself to do it, and that's really amazing. To that point, actually, I'm wondering if you can reflect more on the experience of performing the work aloud, and if it made
Yes.
you feel any differently about the piece, if it informed maybe your practice or the way you look at storytelling in any way, and something that you'll continue to hold on to as you continue to write or perform your work. because there's such a different experience, being able to
Yes.
hear people respond to your words, and it might inform the way you think about the story in a new way, you know?
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's a good question. I think writing, so performing a story in front of an audience, um, and doing that. So, okay, let me take a step back. I think there's different ways that I think you write differently when you're going to perform something versus when it's going to be, it's meant to be read. Or meant to be consumed in a different way. So anyway, the way that people, I guess the media in which people are going to consume whatever it is that you put out, I think kind of impacts the way you write it. And I think something that this process of just writing and then like sending in the audio and then also going and performing the story in front of an audience made me realize that I'm actually more comfortable with this format than I probably thought I was. And because I think when and talking to Neka actually at Writers Club, we keep going back to the Writers Club birthday party, but talking to Neka at that event, and I think, I introduced myself as like I'm a writer, and then you ask what kind of stuff do I write, and I think you introduced yourself as writing personal narrative, and just that phrase, personal narrative, I'd never really thought about that phrase as like because that's the type of writing I enjoy the most and that I want to explore a lot. I find myself like, wanting to explore more in this season of my life, but I don't think I think just that phrase actually was really helpful because I was like, personal narrative. I'd been searching for something. I was like, I never really know what to call this, like writing about myself, but like, kind of exploring my life in a way or like trying to discover things that, my writing is teaching me, right? Because before writing the story, I didn't even know what it was necessarily going to be about. I saw the prompt and I was like, I think I have a general sense of a few ideas. I threw a few words on the page, but I was like, oh, I just want to see but I just in writing essentially the story, as I started writing and just keeping in mind that I was going to perform it on stage, I would kind of make certain stylistic choices of like, okay, this may sound awkward if it's like being read versus like if it's being written. And so I think that kind of, but it was like, I found that to be kind of a fun challenge, but also it's like, it's almost like journaling, but people get to read your journal. I guess is the way that it kind of felt like for me writing this. And I was like, oh, okay. So I think I can, with that in mind, I can move forward with this. But now, Glenn, I feel like I'm not really getting the heart of the question you asked earlier, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of got to it. I was curious just if you had any reflections on what the experience was like of bringing the piece to the stage and how it will sort of influence the way you continue to release your work and practice as a writer. Yeah, it sounds like you're open to the form more. There's
Yes, no,
something
definitely.
just super powerful, I think, about, yeah, bringing the work in front of an audience.
Yes, agreed. Because then
Absolutely.
it's yeah, and it's also it's in the room, it's in the moment, right? It's not. I think definitely. I know one of the other performers is does stand up comedy, which is a kind of a different show as well or a different game. But just like I've been listening to Trevor Noah's podcast lately, and he's a comedian, and just I think he interviewed I think he was interviewing Quinta Bronson, and I think she had tried her hand at comedy, and she was like, oh, kind of her journey, realizing it was not for her. But something that came up was that with comedy or with performing in front of a live audience, I think they were talking about comedy in particular. You get the reaction in the room, you get the reaction like there immediately in front of you, and that's different
Yeah.
from like because if you write and you put it on a blog or release it elsewhere, and people can like read it or Substack, they can leave comments, you can find out how people feel about it, how they how it resonates with them. But the in the moment aspect of things that you get feedback immediately, which like if you're a stand-up comic and you're doing this like for kind of on and on and on again, then I think that you almost kind of have to, I don't know, have tough skin, I feel like, to kind of be able to kind of repeat that. But I think what's beautiful about the craft and release space is that it's the people who have come to the event, I think, are wanting to hear the story. They know what it's about, and it's it was a great audience, I think, for anyone wanting to perform something for the first time as well. So to your credit in like curating that space with people, so I think it made things feel not as daunting as probably would have otherwise felt, having that small group of people. And it was like it felt, even if it was a small group of people, it did feel like it was a packed room. I remember, but yeah, so it felt like it was a perfect place to come in and do something like that for the first time.
Oh, that means a lot. And honestly, when I heard personal narrative, I felt the same way, where it's like, oh, like, I don't want to say I only write about myself or it's a memoir. I'm forever writing my memoir, but it's like, it's narrative work. It's work about myself and my lived experience. I think I enjoy, both Glenn and I love personal essays,
Mm.
really good personal essays, and I think we all three of us connect on that. Um, I'm curious, Idinma, what do you think is the anatomy of a good story, especially when you're looking at your lived experience, because that is what, all three of us write about quite a bit. So what do you feel like is the anatomy
The
of
anatomy
a
of a good
good
story.
personal narrative?
Oh, this feels, I don't know, cliche to say, but one that draws the reader in or the listener in, um, and makes them feel like they really understand what it is like to, if you're kind of revisiting the past, for example, to have been there with you in that moment. Um, and if it's something that you're still kind of going through or figuring out, that they're with you in the thick of it, trying to figure out whatever it is that you're trying to figure out. And so that's anatomy of a good story. I know beginning, middle, and ending. I have to go more than that. Yeah, so I think those are a few things that come to mind of just
Yes,
kind of
please.
reading. You have to have a hook. I was like, actually, it's so funny that you asked that, because when I was writing the story, I was like, oh my god, like I was going back to my college compository writing class, and I'm like, he said something about a good hook. You have to have a hook, and I'm like, what's my hook? I don't know if I have a hook. But I think there needs to be something that's like catchy, right, in the beginning, or something. You have to make sure that your um, whatever is maybe the first argument or the first point you're trying to get across kind of features somewhere in the first. I think maybe you should like end the first paragraph with it or something like that, right? That way it's not kind of all over the place. And I'm someone who, I feel like I tend to ramble and tend to just kind of like digress and go into I say as I'm on this podcast. Um, but and so I think it's kind of writing, kind of putting everything out, and then having to also kind of chip away at certain pieces that maybe don't fit as well. And it's like, oh, you really um, maybe you thought that this is something that should go into the story, but like it's not, and you might just have to kind of get rid of it eventually. But it's, yeah, making sure that the audience is kind of there with you, and like making sure that you're honest with yourself as well about whatever it is that you're writing, and as you let the story unfold. And I think also I it's hard to know the anatomy of a story, I think, when you first start writing it, at least for me. As I said, when I first started writing the story, I don't think I knew all I was going to write. I was just going to write and see what happened. And even the very first paragraph of the story, where I talk about when I'm setting the scene of like me coming to New York, I'm on the plane. That was the very last thing I wrote. I actually wrote the entire story, and I thought it was like, I was like, okay, I'm fine. But it felt like something was like, it just nagging. It felt like something was missing. And I wanted to kind of like go back to, almost go back to to where I am now, and like kind of go back to the beginning of like how this all like comes together. Like, why am I like thinking about this in the context of like, okay, I'm in New York now. What does friendship mean to me, etc. And it felt like something was meaning that I didn't quite know what it was. And yeah, I think those are the different things that make up the anime of a good story for me.
You said something about continuing to be honest with yourself as you're writing. What would you say is the function of honesty in your work?
The function of honesty. I think it allows me to heal on a like really personal level. Um, and this is kind of goes back to what I was talking about with, writing for myself first. And, it's okay if I'm the only one who's saved by whatever it is that I write. Um, I think I have to be honest with myself, because who else is going to be honest with me if I'm not honest with myself? And
Yep.
it's up to me as well to be like, okay, if I write something really honest, and, I have to kind of decide on like whether or not it's something I'm going to share. And it's like, maybe there's certain things that I maybe will end up taking out, because I'm like, this maybe feels a bit too personal to put on paper, put out into the world. But it's enough that I've written it in the first place, and that I've seen it, and like it's out there, and like then that's up to me to kind of explore. But I think for me, honesty is how I heal, because it's basically acknowledging the thing in the first place. And it's just like sometimes I'm thinking things in the back of my mind and I don't like putting it. I think putting words to paper just makes something take life in a way. I think there's a quote from Joan Didion where she says, "I don't know what I think until I write it," or something to that effect. And I think for me as well, sometimes I don't know what I think until I write it, and then I'm like, oh wow, that's kind of how I think about this. And so I think it also, being honest with myself on paper helps me kind of sift through my thoughts and my feelings about experiences, things in the past, and help me also navigate future experiences as well.
Yeah, 100%.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think that it serves multiple functions, but I do think it's like the through line, especially with personal narrative work. Like it doesn't. I think that's the line, right? It doesn't feel real unless there's a high level of honesty in when you're writing about yourself and your life. So it felt that way when listening to your story, especially live, of where you're telling a room full of people that are there for under the theme of friendship,
Yeah.
exactly what you've struggled with and what you've had to do to make friends. So I think that's why we even heard the reactions from the crowd and the agreements in a lot of areas of your story.
Mhm.
What is your current practice? Is it writing daily? Is it every once in a while? Is it on the train? Is it when you feel like it?
Oh,
And what's your current practice look like?
my current practice. Um, I've been trying to challenge myself to write more lately. And, as I was thinking about that coming into this year, I was like, Idinma, that's not specific at all. What is write more? Like, that's not, you could say write more and then, you kind of have to give yourself something to, hold yourself accountable. And so my practice right now is, so I have a calendar, and I know Nika, you have a calendar that you kind of talk about as well in your socials. But I have this like stick magnet calendar on my fridge that I kind of like basically just kind of like keep track of the days, and I just kind of keep myself honest with like the different activities and things that I have going on. Um, and last year I started, working out a lot more consistently. And so I would like put it on there like a check mark of like, oh, I worked out today. Like if I use my pink marker, that means like I've worked out, and it's just like a thing of me to wait for me to just see my progress. And so I decided to do that with writing as well, of just kind of like, so now it's like my blue marker. Like if I have a blue dot on a day, that's a day that I wrote, and it's like I want to see blue dots. So I'm trying to like use it as a way to visually kind of get myself into the habit of writing more. And each week I just use like a tally of like, oh, like I try to work out like whatever 4 or 5 times a week, and it's like I can like just draw some strokes with like my pink pen if I've like worked out, and then it's like with my blue marker I do that if I've written. So that's just one way of like visually trying to just kind of like encourage myself to write more. But I think I also write a lot on the train. So train for me is like my prime reading time because I read a lot. And especially when I'm like getting into audiobooks as well, like it's great to do that on the train. But I think I also I found myself writing a lot more on the train, and whenever I feel just it kind of like a burst of inspiration come to me on the train, whether it's something I've observed or something that is like thought about. I just take out my notes app and I write about it, and I tell myself like, oh, I'm going to return to it. But now it's the returning to it portion of things that's like, okay, because you said it at the last release, you were like, some of y'all's drafts look crazy right now, and I was like, that's me. I mean, I know it's a lot of us in the room as well. But my drafts are crazy. I have so many like unfinished things, and that's why it's good sometimes to just like, okay, I want to revisit, and I did that on Thursday with rough draft. I was like, okay, let me open something that I've like written 2 paragraphs on and try to write a third and a fourth or something, and try to get the story more shaped. So I think I find myself in this space where I have so many drafts, and it's like things collected over the years. I don't even know how many years at this point, but it's a lot of things. But I'm trying to, and I think sometimes it can feel overwhelming in the sense that I'm like, oh, I don't know where to start because I have so many unfinished things, and I don't know what it is that I want to explore now. But I just, I talked to a friend the other day, and she was like, well, what do you want to do right now? Like, I know you have so many interests and you have so many things you want to work on and you have so many things you want to write about, but like, what do you find yourself being drawn to like writing about like the most now? And so I was like thinking about that. And for me, it's a lot of personal narrative work, and it's stuff to do with just exploring things to do with my family. And so I'm trying to just put that to paper now. I'm like, okay, what are the stories? And like, I have so many drafts. I know it's crazy, and like sometimes it feels like it's hard to sift through. but there's a clear pattern here in a way. If I look, it's there, and trying to kind of draw that pattern, and trying to put things together. And I'm not sure. I think I have so many like kind of things in my head that I want to do, but in terms of projects, I mentioned like writing is the oldest dream I've had. I've always wanted to be a writer, and I think growing up I read a lot of novels, so I've always wanted to be a novelist. And so there's a novel in my future somewhere. I don't know what it's gonna look like, but it is there. And so, but it's
There it
like
is.
another
There
thing
it
as
is.
well is that, which I have a friend who's a poet, and he talks about how like practice is you have to just keep working at the muscle of writing. It's not something that I do. I can just keep sitting on like wishing that like, oh, I just like one day I'm just gonna wake up and write this amazing thing that I have in my head, and it's going to come from like consistent practice of like exercising the muscle of writing like you do anything else. And like if I write and write and write, I'm gonna get better at it, right? And then eventually, something's gonna unfold into perhaps what I want. So I guess right now it's just looking like a few times a week. Right now it's just like 1 or 2 times a week, but and sometimes I find myself being like, oh, writing enough, and I try to I'm starting to get in this headspace of being maybe upset with myself for not like writing enough, and then I have to pause and be like, Idinma, you were not writing at all like last year, or this is like
Yes.
once a week is better than nothing, because then you blink and a whole year has passed and you haven't written at all because you wanted to like write consistently, and you were beating yourself up for not writing 5 days a week. But if you write 1 day a week, that's better than, I don't know, 2 years ago or something. So it's like, think about that. Think about my personal progress of like, how am I growing in my writing practice? And so I find that when I hone in on that and focus on like, okay, I'm writing, once a week. That's good. That's something. That's 52. How many weeks are there in the year? Oh yes, that's 52. That's 52 times I've written at the
Yeah.
very least
52,
in
I
like
think.
in this year, right? Like, and so that's good. That's something. And to not discount those baby steps as these humble beginnings or these like small steps. So yeah.
Oh, I think that's beautiful advice, and I'm pro actually seeing it on a calendar, so you can either you can congratulate yourself or shame yourself at the end of the week. So it's a very powerful practice, and one that you definitely have to give yourself some grace in that area, because you got a full-time gig too, and it's a stressful one, but you're carving out room for your dream, and I think that's what's important. That's what all the drafts symbolize, all the starts symbolize, just a step towards that,
Yes, I like that, carving out for your dream.
Idinma, yeah, yes, you're doing that actively. One question for you per your story, which I had, and you, oh, wow, I am messing up this doc right now. Sorry about this. I am on my last leg today. But Idinma, you gave some fantastic advice in the show, which I would love for listeners to hear you kind of give some tips and tricks here. With folks, a lot of them have similar lived experiences, I think, especially post school and moving around. You are literally a citizen of the world, planting new roots in different cities, even internationally. What advice would you give about maintaining the friendships that you made while cultivating new ones for folks listening?
Maintaining the friendships that you made. Yeah, I talk about this a bit in the story as well, but I think intentionality is the key of it, and being intentional about. I think I said watering the gardens of your existing friendships, and I think that um, especially if you find yourself in a place where you're not in the same physical location as the people that you want to maintain these friendships with, which is often the case if you're kind of on the go. And so it's probably going to be a lot of virtual connection, right? Which is not always. I know in person is better, obviously, and I would prefer in person. But it's like I would love to talk to my best friend in person all the time, but I can't do that, right? She actually, I think I mentioned the story. She lives in Kalamazoo, Michigan. She's moved to Boston pretty recently, so yay! Like Boston's much closer than Kalamazoo, Michigan. It's like it's a train ride away, which is like really nice for us to be. I think this is the first time since college that we are both kind of in the same maybe coast in the U.S., if I can call it that. And so it's now that's just closer. Like what it's trying to make sure that I try to go see her when I can, right? Taking a train down there, like she comes up here once in a while when she can. But I think it's the
Wonderful.
intentionality about keeping the friendship alive and making sure that you're continuing to have those conversations. And it's tricky to navigate friendships through, virtually, in a sense, as well, because I think when conflict is like a part of life, and it's going to be a part of like any relationship, right? Friendship. And so it's like it can also be awkward to feel like you're trying to talk to somebody. It's like, oh, I prefer to talk about this in person, and but you just kind of have to get comfortable with that, the fact that a lot of things are going to be virtual, and kind of make peace with that virtual aspect of things. But yeah, I think intentionality is at the heart of it, of making sure you continue to keep those friendships alive in the other places. And I think it's also being honest that you can't take everyone with you in every season of your life that you're in, and being and making peace with that as well, right? And I think and I think something I'm also learning is that you can only have so many friends, right? I think eventually you're going to meet a lot of different people. You're going to make some great connections, and that's great. But like sometimes I pause and think, I'm like, what truly is a friend? And I'm not trying to like wax philosophical about that, but like what's we have different, like, what's a friend, what's an acquaintance, like what does friendship actually mean to me, like what does it mean for someone to be a friend, and like if I'm going to be a good friend to someone, and for someone to be a good friend with me, can I actually be friends with, like, I don't know, 100 people? That's a lot of like maintenance and a lot of intentionality that I don't know that I have to give, what with the full-time job and everything.
Right.
And so I think it's being honest with myself about like what the friendship is in the first place, and like whether or not every connection or these connections are ones that I want to maintain. And like once I'm sure that, okay, these are the connections that I want to, or these are the people I keep finding myself going back to, and they keep coming back to me. Let me honor it and make sure that I'm continuing to give them the time that they deserve as friends, and vice versa, and just being intentional.
That's great advice. Before we wrap, we want to move to one more question that we're going to pull from our All Too Human friendship deck. So you remember we use these cards during the release. So we have 100 questions here. You can choose a number from 1 to 100.
Oh, I get to pick a number. I'm excited. I love numbers. Okay, I'm gonna pick 27.
27. Have you ever made a friend unexpectedly?
Have I ever made a friend unexpectedly? Oh, yeah, actually, someone comes to mind now. I thought I was going to be stumped at this question because I was like, oh my God. But actually, I have made a friend unexpectedly. And I was actually just chatting with them last night. After college, I moved to Austin to work. And I was there for about a year. And I made a friend at work. And it was unexpected because he's a white man in my office. And I was just like, in my head, I was like, I'm just going to go into the office, do my work, leave, and go home. I wasn't trying to like make friends with anyone. And it just like, as a black girl coming from college, I didn't have too many, like, I'm going to be honest, I didn't have a lot of like white male friends. And so I was just kind of like, that's not where I would have looked for friendship. But he's really, really amazing person. And I feel like he worked at like, trying to be my friend in a way. And it just like, I was like, wow, okay, like maybe there's something here. But it's just like, we've gotten to be really great friends. And just had a lot of great conversations. We have a lot of the same interests, like culturally, like music and movies and things like that. And so it just, that's a friend that I made unexpectedly, and I'm glad. Like in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't like let that perceived difference of like, oh, we're
Right.
very different people stop me from like being friends with someone who is wonderful. And he actually texted me a couple weeks ago about this movie he wanted me to go see. He was like, I saw this movie, it made me think about you, and it's about your current situation and all of this stuff. And he's like, go see this movie, Probamista. It's about like it's a kind of a quirky. I don't want to. I think it's by Julio, a guy named Julio. I forget his last name, but he's from El Salvador, and he's just kind of this. The movie's about his immigration journey in the U.S. and like kind of like he dramatized that. It's a very
Oh,
funny, like, out
yes.
loud movie. Like
I
it's
saw
just
the
about
trailer
him.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and Tilda Swinton is in it, and he's like, her character is so unhinged, like you're gonna
Yeah.
doubt. And so you see your character,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm gonna go see. And so last night I was like, I went out and worked out, got a massage, and I was like, like the Angelica film, because it's not one of those movies. It's like mainstream that's like, theaters, but it was like showing at the Angelica film center, and there's right around, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna see if it's showing there, and it was. And like there was a time, and I went in and saw it, and it was like, it's amazing. This is like a great recommendation. And so I texted him, and I was like, great, like this was. Then we talked about it, and had a good conversation, and that was fun. So, but yeah, that's an unexpected friend I made.
Sounds like a sweet friendship. I
Beautiful.
love that.
Yes, very much so. Kindred spirits. It's a
Right.
real thing. Thank you, Idinma, for the many gems dropped. And yes, you're kind of a savant because I forget who says what. But you dropped some quotes and actually had the author that said them. So kudos to you.
I'm actually,
we so
yeah, thank you for saying that. That's actually, I feel like that's a flex I need to lean into more. I'm actually really good with names,
yes,
and things like that. And yeah, but thank you again for having me.
absolutely.
This was a really great conversation.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
we
we're grateful
appreciate
for
it.
you and for being a part of our community. We love seeing you at our events and just happy to have you in the fold. So much more to
Absolutely.
come.
Yes,
So
I'm looking
much
forward
more.
to it. I'm excited for yeah, everything craft and release this year. This is yeah, it's gonna be a great craft and release year.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Idinma.